So I bought a new server. Yeah. What's up guys, welcome to TechAJ, and in this video I am going to do like a small review my recent server that I have bought, the Dell PowerEdge R210 version 2. So my configuration of the R210 II, I've got a Intel Pentium G850 clocked at 2.9 GHz. With the CPU I've got 8 GB, which I think is for 2 gigs. Now included with the server I've got the added management console thing, this expansion card called the iDRAC. And with this, it allows me to access the BIOS and control the main system. That allows me to access the physical buttons on the actual server over the network, which is actually really helpful if you've got a number of these in like a server room and you want to manage all of them at once. What you can do is connect to the server over the network without even being next to the server. And you're able to do simple things like change BIOS settings without even hooking up keyboard, mouse and a monitor to the server itself when it's running. So on the front of the server, I'm going to have some B-roll here. On the front of the server there is a power button, pretty much explanatory. We have got a VGA port, a front VGA port. We have a Dell logo and a bit of a block that had that sort of extruded out of the front of the unit. That is the lights. Because with Dell, when you have it booting up, you usually have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the status light. Each number states what sort of stage the boot process is at. Next, we have two USB 2.0 ports. That's useful to go with the VGA port. If you've got a mouse and keyboard and a monitor, you can plug them into the VGA and the two USBs. And also you can just use them as normal USBs. If you've got a flash drive and you want to install Hypervisor or ESXi or Windows or whatever you want to run to have your server running. Now on the far right, we've got a CD/rewritable drive, slimline drive. I'll be swapping this out with a drive doubler because it's SATA backplane for this drive. I'll be able to put a data doubler which allows me to use a CD drive SATA interface, the slimline ones, with different connectors, and it allows me to adapt it to a full size 2.5-inch drive mounting, which allows me to actually add another hard drive. So we'll be asking for hard drive space with that when I have this server running. There's going to be one of my main servers, that Supermicro server that I bought beginning of the year in February. Video link should be there. Videos on my channel if you go and if you look back. That's one of my servers that I bought. Now to open off the top cover, or to get into the top cover of the chassis, there's a simple lock on the left hand side with like reinforced, not like reinforced, but like countersink sort of square that you can put your thumb in and push the things back. And under the top panel we have a service information sort of sticker that pretty much allows us to get information, basic information of where the certain parts of the server is. So on the left we've got a little bit of a diagram of the motherboard and the ports and what you can service. On the right we've got detailed pictures of how to upgrade or maintain the server. So in the server, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got four 1800 RPM fans. Now, because it's a server, you probably think it's going to be loud. It is very silent. You can hear the fans at low, like you can hear the air that's been pushed, but you don't actually hear the fans when it's booted up. You hear it at the start because it does this diagnostic thing where it ramps up the fans. When it gets really loud, I'll showcase this in a bit. The thing is, in the BIOS, I actually had the BIOS updated to version 2.10 point something. It had version 1.2.3 when I bought it. I updated the BIOS to the latest version. In the BIOS, is the setting to have maximum performance. That might be what I've had default for the BIOS. And what you need to have it set to if you want to have it next to your desk. I'm sort of quoting what AFK Tech said, because he actually bought one of these for, I think it was PF Sense or ESXi. I think he bought it for ESXi. So this then allows you to have the option to have it on OS controlled. So the fans will only ramp up if it detects a load. So these will be dead silent if you're just going to be having like basic tasks like web browsing on a server, or if you're just going to do some basic file sharing. The fans only ramp up a slight bit, not much. But if you're going to be doing something like virtualization, where you're going to have like all cores and all threads allocated to a virtual machine, and you put a massive load like video rendering. I'll get more into depth into video rendering in a few seconds here. But once the fans have detected a load, it can be quite loud. But obviously, because it's a server, you wouldn't expect it being next to your desk. It's mainly to be put in a rack in a room, in some data centers. I've put a 32 gig SSD. That's the one that's in my old server. What I've done is I wiped it, put a clean version of 2012 R2 in it. I might try 2016, but then I've got some worries of having the telemetry because it was 2016 to 2019 server versions, because Windows 10 with the telemetry, I don't think it does have. You can probably give me some information if you know if Windows Server 2016 or 2019 has some telemetry issues. Let me know, and I might have a go at installing it on this. But 2012 is based on Windows 8, 2012 R2, so I've got 30 gig of that. Under the slimline DVD drive, I've got, next to this, get to this red cable. Get to this red cable. I've got a 1 terabyte mechanical drive in there. That's to load my files for my file server. I'm going to be swapping this CD drive out with the data doubler, which I said before. See, it's perfect size. I just have to replace. See, these cables are plugging in the back of here, and it allows me to put a 2.5-inch drive in there. You see, it has like a replica of a normal DVD drive on the front, like that. So I'll be able to put another drive in there if I need to, and I can have 2 SATA ports free for even another drive if I need to, free to set up RAID. More flexibility of what I need to do. Talking about RAID, this supports, I think it's RAID 1, RAID 5, RAID 10. I need to double check on the spec sheet, but that's the basics of what I know. So my review, it's a nice server. I really like it. It's quite quiet if you're not doing any intensive tasks like virtualization or rendering. So what I like about having internal USB ports, yes, these are internal USB ports inside, is that AFK Text said, why on earth would you want these? And the main thing of having USB ports on the inside is that most software like FreeNAS, ESXi, most hypervisors are allowed to be installed on a USB stick, which obviously allows, because if you have it on the front or the back, if you smack your hand against it, you'll end up breaking the port, and by having it on the inside, you don't have access with the panel on. So on the back of the server, starting from the left, we have the iDRAC Ethernet port. You hook it up to your like your modem or switch or router, and that allows you to access the BIOS settings and the console for managing the server. Then I have a serial port. I don't know people that would use a serial port. That's mainly for if you've got like a UPS and you can send commands to it. If the power went out and you've got a UPS hooked up to it, you're able to use the serial port for to send a shut-off command if the power goes out and the UPS runs out of battery. Next we have another VGA port. This is, I think it's an overlay or an exact copy of what you'd find at the front. So there's going to be both video signals duplicated for the front and the back. Next we have an eSATA port right there, and that is mostly used for external hard drives or external rack like disk stations or portable disks. Usually have eSATA, which I think is like slightly newer than USB, but slightly older than USB 3.1. So it's like just same margin of margin area of the time that it came out. Next, we've got two USB ports, self-explanatory. You've got USB at the back. Next, you've got 2 gigabit Ethernet ports. The same on my other server, but the thing about this server, it's got gigabit 1 and gigabit 2. What I found on my other server is that though my Supermicro server that I did a video on ages ago, at the beginning of the year, gigabit 1 was 1 gigabit, and LAN 2 was actually 100 megabits, so it's like 1.1 gigabit, which I found quite weird, so I didn't use the second port because it's like rubbish. Don't really need to use it. Then we have the power adapter and some sort of clip. I'm not really sure what this is, maybe like a little lock for the back or something. I'm not really sure what this is. So, network update before I install the server. My switch at the top, my old server. So this little one new gap. I want to put the new server there. So yeah, I need to remove that. So that's the old IP address. I've recently added a load. If you can see that, I've got a PDU now, so I can now plug in stuff to the server. Plug in stuff if I want to power stuff on the rack, so I can turn it off and on. Nothing's powered up now because it's not in my room. Room's still being done, so that's why you see me in the kitchen making videos for a few videos. Yeah. So yeah. Hopefully in maybe a few weeks I'll have my room sorted out. So I'm now in the office. I've got the server sort of plugged in. I've got the iDRAC Ethernet cable going to my router. Yes, I know it's a beta router. That does that'll do for a little while. So we've got the Ethernet cable going to the iDRAC, and also the yellow cable, which is there, that second one, to the back, so I can access it over the network for Windows. So I'm now going to show you how loud it is when it boots up, and once it's booted up I'm going to show you how quiet it is. So I'm going to press the button over here. So it's quiet when it starts up, but once it gets to the diagnostic side, when it boots up, see it goes to 1, 2, 3, 4 there, and it sort of counts up and it tests the fan speed. Yeah, so it's done the diagnostics already. It's actually quite silent. If I put the microphone up to the front, and that is actually very silent. You can hear the fans are idle, but if you've got like a very sort of busy office environment, you wouldn't even be able to hear that. So I'm going to go over to the computer now, and I'm going to show you how to access the iDRAC. Now I'm on my desktop. When you actually get the server, it would be a good thing to hook it up to the keyboard and mouse to access the BIOS, so you know the IP address of the iDRAC. I've already done that. I've already reset the server, so I know the IP address of the server. So I'm just going to type in the IP address. I see it's the Dell Remote Access, the iDRAC, the integrated Dell Remote Access Controller 6. That number 6 is the version that the server supports. I think you can put a newer version that allows you to have like a new interface, but I prefer that. So I'm going to put the default username and password. I'm going to change this, which you should change it. So default username, if you don't know that, is the username is root R210ii, and the password, like you probably do, is you might put password in, but actually it's called Calvin, Calvin. I don't know who that name is, but so this is the iDRAC page. See Virtual Console Preview. If you click on Launch, I don't know why it does that, but you have to remove the little information afterwards and just have the JNLP. So have viewer, opens up Java, make sure I have Java installed. Going to continue. It's going to verify and load. It's going to connect. And there we go. So this is basically like remote desktop, but you can actually manage a server. So we're going to macros, control, delete. This is Windows Server 2012. I might just log in now. If I put the correct password in, that'll help. So this is now the server that I booted into. So if I now restart this, now the thing you probably think I'll disconnect, well, if you wait for this, you find out. So I'm now restarting the server. And there we go. So we're now booting like you would normally see if you connect to a monitor. You see I'm now booting R210ii version 2.10. So if I click on F2, I can access the BIOS, which is actually really helpful. Like I said before, you can access the BIOS without having to plug in a keyboard and mouse to the screen, which is really helpful. And there we go, we're now in the BIOS. So as I would do with a keyboard, mouse and monitor, I can go for the BIOS, change settings. It will be a bit laggy because obviously it's trying to transfer the data of the network to the server and back. It's basically like a VNC client, but it's with a keyboard and mouse and a monitor. I might as well enable some of the ports, have the optical drive enabled, so I'll be needing that later. On processor settings, you can pretty much change it. Like we've got Pentium G850. You can have it set up with a i5 or an i3 3100, or is it 2500? I'm not sure, but most of them is probably a Xeon. This is like a special Xeon. It doesn't use a lot of power. It's around about 100 watts idle. 100 watts idle, which is actually pretty good. My other server was like 210 watts when it was idle. So it's actually quite a power saver if you have it running 24/7.